Okay, the January 18th, 2024 meeting of the Corvallis School Board is called to order at 6:37 p.m. Thanks for your patience, everyone, with our few-minute late start. In the interest of public health and safety for all community members, especially immunocompromised individuals and their families, the Corvallis School Board will continue to offer a virtual option for board members and district personnel participation. Additionally, public comment is available at some meetings, both in person and virtually. Information about how to provide public comment is available on the Corvallis School District website. The board agenda and packet, as well as the link to the district YouTube channel, are available on the school board page on the district website. Public meetings are live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a recording is posted to the same channel typically the day after the meeting. Tonight we have all board members in attendance in person and no absent board members. And we had executive session, and our next item is acknowledgement of Black History Month. And we're going to take turns reading the proclamation, starting with Judah.
Corvallis School District 509J, Resolution Number 21/0201, Acknowledgement of Black History Month. Whereas the Corvallis School District recognizes and pays tribute to the significant contributions made in our community by Black and African American people, and
whereas in 1926, Black History Month grew out of the establishment of what was then called Negro History Week by Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And whereas Black History Month was first proclaimed nationally in 1976 and has been celebrated annually ever since, and
Testing. Is this still okay? We can switch.
Okay. Whereas this nation was built upon the stolen labor of African peoples, and whereas the descendants of African people forcibly removed from their homes now live in diaspora, and
whereas the state of Oregon has a documented history of anti-Blackness, and whereas inequality and injustice still linger in our cities, states, and country, and it is the responsibility of citizens to advance the American notion of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all, and
whereas our diverse culture enriches and broadens the American experience, of which Black and African American heritage is an inseparable part as it weaves throughout our country's history, profoundly influencing every aspect of our lives, and whereas education is a necessary component for creating a more equitable and anti-racist community, nation, and world, and
whereas the Corvallis School District has made a commitment to equity and anti-racism, and whereas the Corvallis School District has a responsibility to honor and respect the diverse histories of our community.
Therefore, let it be resolved by the Board of Education of the Corvallis School District
Here proclaim February 2012 each February annually as Black History Month in the district, and strongly encourage families, staff, and community members to join in existing local celebrations.
And encourage all schools in the district to help highlight this month in grade-appropriate ways, as well as highlight the contributions of Black and African American peoples to the local community, nation, and beyond, historically in current times.
Great, thanks you all. And as a reminder, we're reading that a little bit ahead of time, so it's proclaimed again before February starts. And then next, thing on the agenda is student representative reports. We have Liam and Eileen with us this evening. I don't know which one of you would like to go first. Okay, so we'll hear from CHS first.
Hello, my name is Liam Gottlieb. I'm a junior at Corvallis High School. So we haven't had school this whole week, as you all know. So I'm not I'm not too up to date with what's going on in regards to ASB and leadership right now. But I do know our winter formal, I believe, is next week, and I'm not sure if it's a Friday or a Saturday, but it's coming up. And there's been a bit of controversy at our school because there's been a policy that if you have 12 tardies and a couple other things, like you're not in standard academic, like meeting academic standards, that sort of thing, then you're not allowed to go to the dance. And so that's kind of limited a lot of the number of people eligible to go. So there's been talk about that. I know a worry from our junior and senior class presidents is if this policy will be the same for prom, which I'm pretty sure it won't be. We'll have to talk to the administration more about that because prom is how a lot of things for the senior class are funded. So if there were to be fewer people, there'd be less funding. So there's that. But besides that, I don't have anything else to report.
Thank you, and then we'll hear from College Hill.
The students in the construction program completed their annual district service building project. This year, the students each participated in the design proposal process for a new fence for the College Hill Horticulture Garden. Students explored the neighborhood, studying different fence designs, researched strengths and weaknesses of each, and developed financial bids. These designs were submitted to a committee who chose one design for the build. The team then learned how to install a new fence post and built a beautiful new fence with an adjoining arbor for the garden. And Eric wanted you to know that you should all come see it. For the past several years, our urban farm, horticulture, and environmentalship students have partnered with the Greenbelt Land Trust and the Marys River Watershed Council to propagate, grow, and plant native species that are essential elements of the life cycle of the endangered Fender's blue butterfly. The good news is that in part because of our efforts, this animal is no longer in the endangered species list. It has been incredible to be a part of saving this species. We're now researching other local endangered life forms that we can help to preserve. And second semester, students at College Hill will have the opportunity to take part in a business marketing class in partnership with the organization Girls Who Sell. This group works to train female students for high-demand, high-wage jobs in the sales industry, where women are highly underrepresented. Our hope is to support a cohort of our students and expose them to living wage careers that they may not have known about before. We're excited for this new course and this new partnership.
Awesome, thanks for the reports, you all. I just want to say that's super amazing with the project y'all worked with on the butterflies. That's awesome. I have some questions about that policy you mentioned too. And I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments for student reps. Okay. And then the next thing on the agenda is, I'm on the wrong page. The Muddy Creek Charter School Annual Report, and we have a presentation. You all are welcome to come up. Sarah Danforth is here to present on this. Did you want to say anything ahead of? Are you good? Okay. So welcome. Thanks for being here this evening. And as you're getting set up, just press the button for it to turn green. Will help everyone hear you.
So having sat in that chair before and trying to get logged into Zoom, I'm going to talk so that you can get yourself set up.
Okay,
and try
thanks,
to
Melissa.
kind of do some vamping here so that you have time to get done what you need done. So I am very happy to welcome Sarah here tonight to talk to you about Muddy Creek. Sarah is the new executive director at Muddy Creek Charter School, and one of the jobs that I have as an assistant soup is to have a connection with Muddy Creek. Immediately, Sarah is, well, you're just going to see, She's very charismatic, and you're going to really like her. I enjoy Sarah quite a bit. We talk at least once a month, and she's just full of energy and excitement for Muddy Creek. And if you, what you're going to see tonight, I think, because I previewed the slides, is kind of that revitalization of the school. It's kind of been a few years of just kind of floating along. But I think Sarah has exactly the right mindset to make that change. So I'm pleased to welcome Sarah, and one of the board members is here in the back as well, and I'm sure she'll introduce him. So Sarah, if you're all set, take it away.
I think so. Is that working? Okay. This is Lester Oler. He's our board president and a parent, which is wonderful. We have lots of representation of our parents, but I'm just glad to include him tonight. I have a presentation I'm sharing on Zoom. There we go. And I'd like to take you through some of the news at Muddy Creek, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions, share your thoughts. So I'll just get started, if it will let me. Okay, so we're going to cover 6 topics tonight, 6 things that are new at Muddy Creek. New and exciting, maybe. It's exciting to me. All right, first things first, what is Muddy Creek? I don't know if everyone is familiar with us. We are a charter school that is sponsored by the Corvallis School District, and it's a small school. We have between 100 and 125 students. And our charter, well, originally the school was created as a charter school when it was going to be closed. It was an Innisville rural school. It was part of the district. It was going to be closed, and the community said, let's come together and let's keep it going, because we really value this location. We value the community that it's in, and we want to do something a little different. So requested charter through Corvallis School District. So one of the things that's new is this lady. There have been a lot of, I don't want to say struggles, but like a lot of ambiguity coming out of COVID, even maybe going into COVID possibly era. So one of the things that we changed, the board hired me in May, and I was popping out at the end of last year, but started in earnest in July. They kind of got a trifecta with me because I have a lot of experience in business as a manager of people, and then I was a farmer as well, and I've spent the last 10 years in the classroom teaching 2nd and 3rd graders. I was also our school garden coordinator and our volunteer coordinator and our experiential learning committee leader. So it just fits in with pretty much everything that Muddy Creek does. And I think Melissa kind of touched on it, but what I'm trying to bring to the school is that spark of enthusiasm. It was a rough time, and the people who were there really felt it hard, and it was hard to spring back. But I think we've got a lot of new staff, and we've got a lot of new energy, and we're making a lot of good changes. One of the biggest and most important improvements that we're working on this year is our academic excellence. Muddy Creek has an interesting model in that in the morning it's dedicated to core, ELA, math, and practice, small groups. But then in the afternoon, the entire after lunch, and by the way, the lunch is communal, everybody together at the same time. It's wonderful, multi-age, multi-grade. And then in the afternoons, we have that entire 2.5 hours to focus on science, on exploration, on projects, and of course our niche, which is place-based education, really honing in on the place that is your classroom, or the place that is your school, or your community around the school, or even your broader community in Corvallis. So each grade, 1 class per grade, each grade decides what projects and what place-based exploration they're going to pursue. They have multiple projects throughout the year, and they have that afternoon for science, dedicated science, and then they have project-based, and then they have their enrichment. So our specialists, the music teacher, the art teacher, even our PE teacher and our librarian collaborate with the teachers, and they extend the classroom learning into those specialties. Give them a double whammy. Here's some examples of our students' work this year. I'll kind of go around the one that says third grade happenings was a personal narrative project that our third grade teacher did with the students. And just below it, there's a picture of students here. That is them in a tea house kind of reading environment. They had their little teacups and little snacks, and they dressed up fancy that day, and they read their personal narratives to one another, as professional writers do, and it was quite a beautiful day. We have some fourth grade robots, and I think they were exploring, it was how to express themselves. Those are representations of the students. That was from the first week of school. And we have our gingerbread pirates. That's most recent in first grade. They were doing a writing project, and they were doing gingerbread houses, and they decided to, infuse a little bit of their own flavor in there. So gingerbread pirates. The fourth grade also is doing a project where they are they're looking into the consumer producer model, and they've decided to create a fictional pizza parlor. And those are their promotional posters, and then they're exploring how that would be, and then I believe we all get to have pizza at the end of this project. We have shapes and colors and senses exploration up here in kinder, and then this is back to third grade. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm a third grade teacher. I'm always in there taking pictures of their stuff, but they recently did a project where they were exploring their ancestry. Something else we're working on this year is a lot of fundraising. Many of you are probably very aware that as a charter school, we do not receive the full amount of funding that the traditional public schools do. We receive 87.5% of the money that, like I said, an average public elementary would. And so that leaves us with this 12.5% that's sort of missing. And we are working very hard with our PTO and with our staff to do a lot of fundraising to bridge that gap. This year, that's not new. That's always been true. What's new is that we have launched this annual giving campaign and really kind of tried to put some weight behind it and some thought and some time. So far, so good. We started with a goal of $50,000, and I think we just made it I think it's 7,500 right now. So could be higher, but we still got a few months to go. Something that was really important to me at the beginning of the school year was to focus our efforts. Anywhere I've worked, there have been places that have been a little scattershot, everybody doing whatever just happens to cross their desk at any time, and it's really difficult to focus on what's important. The best places I've worked have had strategic vision, strategic goals, and when you are trying to decide between one thing and another thing, you look to your strategy, right? And so at the beginning of the school year, I rolled these goals out, largely from my own brain and observations. We're in the process of goals version 2.0, which include the teachers' experiences and thoughts. But for now, we're focusing on continuous improvement. Muddy Creek gets a lot of young teachers, a lot of new teachers, and sometimes in the past they have been under-supported, less mentoring than they would have liked, less professional development. I know that I am learning every single day. I'm trying to become better at my job because it's a new job for me. And so I've told them that we are investing in them too. Every single person, the children, the staff, me, everyone, even the parents, are learning something every day. And I think just having that approach is really helpful, just coming in knowing that we're all gonna experiment, we're all gonna mess up sometimes, and we're all gonna be supported. Student safety and belonging. It is important to me that every student in our care feels like they belong in that school. And anecdotally, it doesn't feel like it's always been the case. It's important. It's vitally important. And so we are spending a little time every day getting to know our families, getting to know our students, and prioritizing their experience and their voice in our school. It seems like everybody should be doing that. Everybody should be doing that. But it isn't something that's been prioritized in the past, and so we're doing that this year. And additionally, just making sure that we are communicating. Sometimes when you're in the weeds, the last thing you think to do is include your parents or families in the conversation. But we need to. We're a team. It's not us teaching the kids. It's not them growing the kids. We're a team. And so for me, it's important to have that transparency, to make sure that we are helping the parents understand what is being taught, how we're grading, what does that mean moving forward, and even just, did Johnny have a bad day? Let's communicate that too. Did Sally have a fantastic day? Let's communicate that too. Let's keep those lines of communication open. And again, that's something that need to be prioritized. So place-based project-enriched rural education is at our core. That is the charter that we renew with you. It's the thing that makes us special. And again, kind of post-COVID, it's not always been there. We have not rolled back in as strong as we need to. Sometimes we just needed to focus on like reading and math. We needed to start there. And I think at this point, we're ready to come back to basics. Here are some examples of things that have happened recently at our school. Our amazing art teacher, Karen Anderson, recently did a ceramics project with all the students so they could have holiday gifts for their families. Each student got at least 2 items, and it was amazing. She tried to theme it with the classes and what they're learning as well. There's a lot of mushrooms from kinder and first. Second grade is working on their understanding of erosion, and they started with Mystery Science, our new curriculum for science, and have rolled it into the playground where they are dumping water on every single thing and just seeing how it all happens. Down here we have the third grade out in this is our field, in our woods, and they call themselves Exploratorium time. I think that, I'm sure I'm not getting that right, but it's in that zone. You get the flavor of it. And so they go out daily and check in on our grounds and see what they can observe and see. One day they found an owl that had been injured, and we even got to call Shintimony, and it was a whole amazing moment where the school came out and it was rescued. Thank goodness they had gone out there that day, because otherwise we may not have even seen it. And here we are all trekking up Mary's Peak. We do this once a year. Historically, I've done it once a year, where the entire school goes to the top of Mary's Peak. And the reason we do that is to kick off our place-based learning. If you get to the top of Mary's Peak, you can see the school, and you can probably see Adams, and you can pretty much see the beach from there everywhere. And so it's a beautiful moment where the whole school is looking at the place. This is the place in place-based. Everywhere you can see is the place in place-based learning at Muddy Creek. And the kids loved it so much, and the families loved it so much. And you can see how many turned out. I guess it hasn't been well attended recently, but like almost all of the families had somebody representing there. And they had such a great time, they've asked if we can do it again in the spring, and I think we absolutely have to. And this is the prettiest of our garden boxes. We have a little garden effort happening this year. I told you I was a garden coordinator, and our facilities manager, Kalesh Weaver, is so committed to our garden, thank goodness, because I never have enough time. But when I got here, it's kind of that much. But next time I show you, it's going to be glorious. It's going to have fence posts, just like yours. And we'll have a lot more to share. But definitely been a wonderful opportunity for the kiddos who need a brain break to go out. They do a little weeding, they do a little tasting, a little moment to themselves with them quiet. And a very important focus for us is building community. And it's interesting because community is looking different depending on who you are at Muddy Creek. It was interesting to me to hear the parents, when I joined, tell me how sad they were that they felt disconnected, they didn't feel invited back. It was difficult with all the vaccination requirements and everything that was happening when we were trying to reintegrate into school, into live school. And so I continue to give them as many invitations as I can. Please come join us. Please be a part of this. One of those, the first things that we did was we tried to acquire as many volunteers as we can. We got a software package to manage our volunteers, to do all of the background checks. We're going strong at 55, and and we only have 103 kids. This is a lot of volunteers, and they're very active. We just actually last month rekindled the parent-teacher organization. We didn't have a PTO when I started, and that was impossible. How do you do all of the things with the fundraising and all the activities and the fun stuff that makes school interesting for children if you don't have any help? So as of December, we now have a parent-teacher organization, and they are amazing, and they've taken it and rolled. We also have Class Dojo. A lot of people use this for communication. We just want to make sure that parents and teachers are sharing their thoughts. Actually, this morning when I sent them a note saying, hey, it's possible we'll have school tomorrow. The teachers see you. Why don't you send us some pictures of your house? And oh my gosh, I was spammed on Dojo this morning. All the kids wanted to share pictures of their little snowy house. Perfect. It's exactly what we need. We are doing monthly newsletters, and we actually have had 3 school-wide events. They're all pictured here. At the top, we had our first Christmas concert, winter concert. And some of these students have never been in a concert in their little lives. And it was the most beautiful thing. We really didn't, we got a music teacher this year, very part-time. She also works as an EA. Her name is Evangeline, and she has just taken it to levels that I didn't expect. She said, let's do a winter concert. I said, absolutely. Let's do a sing-along. And let's have a fundraiser and have hot dogs and stuff and cocoa. And we got a little crazy. And then we're like, is anybody going to come? We don't know. Let's pretend everybody's going to come. And they all did. I didn't get a big picture of the crowd, but it was full. We had to get extra chairs out of the thing, out of the dungeon, the chair room. All the children performed. It was beautiful. What you're seeing there is one of our students playing a ukulele, and he was right after another student who played a piano solo. It was beautiful. Down below, this was actually in the spring, and it was a school-wide barbecue on the last day of school. And very fun Gaga Ball tournament. If you're not familiar with Gaga Ball, it's kind of like wall ball extreme. And we were invited by Ashbrook to participate in a tournament. And so it was Ashbrook and us and Kings Valley and Zion, and it was raucous and hilarious, and we got second place, and it was amazing. But all of these things contribute to our sense of community. The teachers have also, well, not just teachers, every one of my staff member, when we meet to talk about goals and to talk about, evaluations and observations, I ask, how are you connecting to your community? Do you have a community? Melissa's been very generous and allowed me to join her principal's community. And whenever I can join those meetings, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. When the teachers can have their professional learning communities or reach out to other teachers in other elementary schools, they have a community. Our counselor and our behavior specialist have reached out, and they've developed community within your district and greater. So that's been a huge priority for us. And I know you've seen this, so I figured I better just have a slide. These are our at-a-glance scores. Remember that slide I said about academic excellence? This is connected. So the 3 SBAC scores, or you call them OSAS, right? Something else. Indicate that we are near where we should be on math and ELA. And we have some work to do in our science, particularly for a school that, as I just mentioned, has 2.5 hours a day for science. We have already made great efforts in that area and expect continued growth. It will take a little time. The thing that is important to keep in the back of your mind, science is only tested in 5th grade. Our 5th grade class last year was 12 students. So if some are opted out, if someone's sick, if somebody just like marking C the entire time, some of the students didn't know how to type that affects their scores. So we're identifying these low-hanging fruit, and then we are tackling the less low-hanging fruit in a more strategic way. And this was something we made on the first week of school. It's the bulletin board as soon as you walk into the school. And every student and every staff member made a fish, and it says, we may all be different fish, but in this school we swim together. And I think that's a beautiful representation of Muddy Creek in a nutshell. Thank you for your time. I would be so happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation and your work over at Muddy Creek. We have a few minutes for questions from board members.
This is not a question, but if you could pass along to your fourth grade class that if that was a real pizza restaurant, I would absolutely go there.
I'll send you pictures.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and welcome aboard, and congratulations on really phenomenal work that you do. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate
And
that.
I remember last time I was there, I can't wait until I can go back again and learn from the students. I always share my vulnerable story here as someone who is a bilingual, never learned biology in English. And there was a 6th grader holding a snake and started talking to me about it. And I asked him, well, does this snake sting? And he looked at me and was like, snakes don't sting, they bite. So I really appreciate the wealth of knowledge, but also the confidence to get me to learn about that. Now, I want to go back to the last slide you shared, really the wealth of diversity of our students, and really appreciating to see that we are embracing one of the things I really would like to see, not necessarily right away, but down the road, is how access to the school and also how performance and outcomes within the school are reflected when we break it down to different identities based on race, poverty level, and also other socioeconomic and other factors, and really to be able to see how that relates as a benchmark, probably with the state average or with the communities that Muddy Creek represents, acknowledging it is beyond Corvallis only, the larger Muddy Creek area. So that would be something I would really love to be able to see, and I can see the evidence of your intentionality around it in that slide, and I would love to be able to learn more about the efforts and the outcomes for that.
Thank you. That's important to me as well. And there are a couple of areas that I feel we could, if we could improve our diversity as well. And we're actively working on those.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? I just had one kind of, not necessarily a question, but just a suggestion. If you don't already know about the Tribal Histories, Shared Histories curriculum through ODE as a great place-based resource.
Yes.
Since that's such a strong emphasis, especially with you all spending so much time at Mary's Peak and all the stories that there's a lot of stuff that the Grand Ronde tribes have put out too that can really help with that connection to place piece. I think that'd be really cool to, if you don't already do it, I don't know if you do, but.
Our kindergarten teacher is very passionate about that particular curriculum and, of course, our connection to our land and the people who were there before us. So and I think they updated the curriculum this year as well. I believe there were some updates to it. So she really took Native American History Month, November, to teach her kindergartners and the other students who kind of came through. And she was our first grade teacher before then, and so she taught them song. She taught them how to acknowledge the land and its history, and she also took everyone to rain dance, which was really marvelous. But thank you. It is a wonderful resource.
Nice. Okay, cool. Thanks. And yeah, that was just resource share.
Thank you.
Nobody else has questions? We can say again, thank you for your time and the work you're doing over there. I know it takes a lot of time to prepare presentations and hang out with us in the evening. So after, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, next on the agenda is the emergent strategy book review conversation. I believe you all had some material shared with you, right, about it? Yes, okay. Did you want to kick it off, or was I kicking? You have the... Kim has some questions and stuff printed out that we'll be going over. So we'll just give ourselves a moment for that. Okay, hold on, we're gonna get, we have an updated version. We'll take those back. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Pass them back. We're gonna go ahead and take a 5-minute break while we get that printed, and that's a nice little segue break, and yeah. Okay, welcome back, everyone, and thank you for reprinting, Kim. So we're going to go over emergent strategy. Can I use yours since my copy of my book is trapped on campus in the ice? And so that's this emergent strategy book that we read in the summer, or we started reading in the summer, I should say, ahead of the goal setting in our retreat in the summer, and it's by Adrienne Marie Brown. And one of the reasons I was really excited to read it as a board, because it helps us think about leadership differently, shared leadership, and decision-making, and helping bring in community, and what that means as a board, and felt that she had some good ideas about it. So Shauna, Teresa, and I kind of chatted about it and proposed to Ryan that we read it, just giving a little bit of context for folk who aren't aware of what happened with that as part of the read. And I appreciate her work a lot. And so I'm going to just read this little excerpt right here to get us going. Again, it's written by Adrienne Marie Brown. She explores principles of collaboration and adaptability. She connects nature with the concept of decentralized systems that can be applied to social change. And a quote on page 13 is, "Emergence is the way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions." And there's not a simple way to describe emergent strategies, because all the pieces work with each other to impact the choices we make. As members of the Corvallis School District community in various capacities, we all impact the small places we inhabit within the system in ways that touch other areas. Emergent strategy asks us to reflect, look for connections, and think of the possibilities that exist through relationships that coexist and work with each other. And I'm gonna hand it over to Ryan for a couple moments.
Yeah, so the board leadership put together some areas, sort of themes from the book that we wanted to be able to spend some time on today. And so each one of us will take one or two questions. And really what we're trying to do is take themes from the book and think about how those themes impact us as individuals, but also collectively as a school board, and some of the ways those things play out. I think that when you do a book study, one of the things that I appreciate about them is when I learn more about who the folks are that I spend time with. And so I think some of those questions are really meant for us to be able to spend time in a work session with the themes from this book, but again, thinking more collectively about how we continue to work together. So that's our intention in the next 30 minutes. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Lou, because Lou's going to take the first question around fractals.
Yep, and so the first one, like Ryan said, we're gonna chat about is the concept of fractals. That's personally one of my favorite parts of the book. And the way that we practice small scale sets for the pattern of the larger systems is, it all starts in those small little patterns. And one of the quotes from the book says, "A fractal is a never-ending pattern. Fractals are infinitively complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. They are created by repeating a simple process over and over in an ongoing feedback loop." So you can think of fractals in a lot of ways. And how we are at the small scale is how we are at the large scale again. So our decisions and choices create patterns that impact the larger work we are involved with. And so for these questions, it's kind of like self-reflect, and if you would like to share that, of course, you can share on that. Where do you see fractals in your life, in your relationship with Corvallis School District, beyond? What patterns have you helped create? So as you're thinking about that, we start with ourselves as a small piece of the larger picture, and then we're connected through Corvallis School District, in the broader community of Corvallis, Oregon, the United States, North America, the world, the universe. Like, it's this repeating pattern that goes across all these larger spaces, and we're a small piece of it. And so whatever we do impacts all of the things around us. And so it's kind of to think about She uses a lot of imagery about seashells and those patterns that they create too. Yeah, so that's the questions for us to consider right now. Okay. Go ahead, Therese.
Ooh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so it's just like being in class when you ask a question and then nobody wants to go first. Is that?
Yeah, pretty much, and I should have gave my disclaimer. I actually given my classes like Native peoples, the communication in the communities I'm part of, like silence is a thing, so we just kind of, it's not awkward for me, so if it's awkward for you all, sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
No,
But yeah,
it's not
but I
awkward.
think
I'm just like,
it's
oh, we could be silent for the whole time, which would be its own statement.
It would be.
For sure.
It would be interesting.
But I don't want to be silent for the whole time because I want to get to some of the other questions too.
Thank you, Therese.
So what actually, I was when we were talking about fractals, yesterday as we were kind of preparing and talking about, having this time today, I was thinking about the emphasis over about the repeating at scale and thinking about what changes when the scale of something changes and how, the whole notion of processes repeating over and over, this piece of scaling up or down feels really important for like, what does it mean to maintain the structure of something when you make it bigger or when you take something that's bigger and you make it smaller? And so I was trying to think about the processes that we repeat over and over, and if those hold when they get bigger, like, for example, if they apply to everyone in our entire community versus if they're smaller, do they hold process and we bring it down to the individual level? Is the fabric of the process doing what it needs to do? Will it work when it's working way as if it needs to work for for everybody attached to the school district or the community? And so it's not really a question. It was more of just a thinking about that concept of patterns when you change the scale of them, and what should we be looking for? What's important in our processes? What should stay constant, and in what ways should the pattern that it makes be able to be different based on size, and what pieces of it should still be very much constant and still very much identifiable, whether we're talking about one person or we're talking about 1,000 people, or an entire school district. And I tried to think about that for my own self, and I struggled really to think about the patterns that I participate in as an individual, as a board member, as a parent. I tried to think about if those practices scale up, scale down with consistency for me, and I don't have an answer to it. I just realized that I had never thought about it this way, and that there's value for me in paying attention to the things that I participate in, and asking myself about what's really at the core of that. What is important? Is it working when I'm having a one-on-one conversation with a community member or when I'm in a board meeting? So yeah, it's just something I'm going to be pondering, and I think trying to be more in tune with for myself.
Thanks, Therese, for those thoughts also. I think that related to something that came up as very concrete for me as I thought about this in terms of that idea of fractals, and even those first words that we have here of what we practice at a small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. And thinking about this in terms of something I know that we've talked about working on as a board is communication, right? And so thinking about the small acts of just our interactions with each other and pausing to check in with each other in our interactions in those ways, and how that translates, or even the relationships that we have with district leadership, with our fellow student board members, and the community. That going up to another level of scaling out of when we have public comment. This year, one of the things that we've done is really looked at even the language around public comment, and how do we make a process and a procedure that can feel very cold and very one directional sometimes in coming toward the board and looking at, okay, is there a language we can adjust to make this warmer, to make this more inclusive, to make it feel a little bit, and then thinking about where you were going with that too, Therese, around larger scale, well, district communication. You know, whether it's school board members communicating with one person we're connecting with in the community and trying to have a really meaningful conversation to really deeply listen, or scaling that up to how are we communicating about policy in a way that honors the humanity that we still have in those one-on-one conversations that we may not have or we may not think about as intentionally but really should be at the larger scale too. So that was just a concrete example that I was mulling around with.
It's sort of, is this the one that's not working, or is it working? Okay. Thinking about both what Therese and Shauna have said and thinking about patterns, I was also thinking about we've done a lot of work over the last year or so of intentionally including people into conversations about things like our goals. So thinking about as you scale up patterns, who needs to be involved in sort of determining how that pattern progresses, because my personal goals, I get to decide that. My family goals, we do that, work on that together. The school district goals, that we expand into a population where we have to be more intentional about who is involved in setting that pattern. So I was just thinking about, as you set patterns, with each sort of step in expansion, who needs to have a voice in that pattern, who needs to determine the direction that pattern. I was thinking about frost spreading, like who needs to determine which way that frost is going to go.
I was going to say one more thing, and then we should probably move, because we have a lot of things to cover. And not everybody has to respond to all the questions, too, just to take that pressure off of us, too. But when you said the frost, had been thinking, as I was listening to everybody, about those little kaleidoscope things that you look through, and like they all change the patterns. That's a good way to like visualize fractals, right? Like there are all these patterns that are interlocking and they repeat each other. And so, but each time you move it, it changes the pattern, but it's still like this repeating sequence. And it could be one small conversation with a community member, one-on-one, or it could be somebody listening to our board meeting or somebody giving public comment. If you think about like that could be like if you twisted it, it changes the pattern a little bit, but it changes the entire picture that you see. And so that's kind of the way you can kind of visualize how fractals can work, is like this small piece, but it impacts the whole picture. And it can be super beautiful, and sometimes it can kind of make it a little bit distorted too. So it can go a lot of different ways, but in the context of how I'm hoping we're talking about it would be in the beautiful, colorful kind of way. But yeah, who was doing number 2? Are we doing number 2, Ryan? Okay, Ryan's gonna do 2 and 3.
So another theme in the book was around intentional adaptation, because things are constantly changing, and how do we handle change? And one of the concepts that she talked about was, that change doesn't necessarily have to be scary, and it's pretty predictable that things will continue to change and evolve. And so she wrote how we live and grow and stay purposeful in the face of constant change. This is the process of changing while staying in touch with our deeper purpose. So I was thinking about that question and sort of your roles here. And so as members of this group, how do you respond to personally, like how do you think about responding to ongoing change and at the same time sort of maintaining that purpose of service? So you all came on the board with a kind of ideals about why you felt it was important to be on the board as a student and a voice for students, or as a board member, as an elected official in our community. And as we continue to face changes, which will continue to be could just continue to happen, how do you balance those two pieces between anticipation of change and maintaining the purpose that you started with coming into this organization? So again, I think it's thinking about how the principles of this book influence and impact our work.
So this also really ties into question 5, because I really felt that this concept of interdependence and interdependence in a community was well, I read it throughout the whole book, and something that I struggled with in deciding to run for office was this concept of authority, and that really we're kind of an artificial body that's making huge decisions for this big community. And I appreciated the hope and the faith of that no one single unit, person, student, teacher, administrator could handle this, but how a community's relying upon each other. You're changing together, you're waving together, you're relying on each other to be moving and growing and weathering conflict and difficulties. And my experience thus far being on this board, has, especially being a new board member, is having to be vulnerable and ask a lot of questions. And I'm going to say that, yes, every single person in this room right now has helped me in learning and growing and facilitating this role. And what Shauna mentioned earlier about trying to make public comment more accessible, trying to hear from more people, because the more voices we come in, the more interdependent we are with the community, that the less scary changes will seem, because it's not you, it's y'all. You know, it's this group. And I found the take on what change is and growth to be a really hopeful message about even thinking about decentralizing authority, to say that we can rely on each other and that somebody who is capable can step up and make that, can be helpful, and especially having the opportunity to meet so many of our school administrators throughout the wonderful greet sessions. Even though change can be scary, it's the anticipation, knowing what a fantastic community and team has been built up inside of this school district helps me feel like, yes, we can weather the changes and the difficulties that we can't predict, that we can predict will come. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a bit of this that I kind of had a hard time with, because the whole idea of change doesn't have to be scary. Because I feel like sometimes when change is a little bit scary is when growth really happens. It's that area of discomfort where you push yourself and you change how you think. And so that was sort of an interesting, as I was reading that, I was thinking, but I want it to be scary sometimes. I want us to be pushed into discomfort so that we can grow and learn and expand the way we're thinking. So that was sort of a place where I was like, I kind of think differently than she's presenting that idea right there.
So do you think that has more to do with sort of your, the way you think about change than maybe others do, in that you see it as a growth opportunity more than a thing to try to back away from or stay a part of? I'm just curious based on that.
I mean, I think of change as more of a process than a destination. And so I think that process involves pushing yourself and challenging your ideas and being uncomfortable. I mean, maybe where you end up isn't scary, but the process of change. Is that kind of what? Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't trying to lead. It just made, no, there's not. It just made me wonder about how you thought about it.
I really think it's the process versus destination. I think it kind of explains some of that.
I think it's all about like how we interpret words too, and I think that's something that we've talked about as a board before, with even some of the language in our policies, or even our budget parameters. You know what I mean? Like with words. So scary for some people may bring the word fear into the conversation, which is different than discomfort.
Right.
And so if there's a reaction of fear based on the scary versus being a little bit uncomfortable, that can change how somebody receives change too. And so I think that's something for us to think about too. And I think that's a good example of like having conversations like this can help impact the work that we do as we share words and may have multiple meanings to them.
Well, I was at the risk of putting Eileen and Liam on the spot. It's also okay to just say, I don't really have a response to that, or I'm not sure, but I'm curious from your perspectives, or from either of you, if something comes up for you. As students, you're asked to change a lot, and it's expected you'll change and learn and grow. And so I'm curious, in your role right now, why is change important? Why is it helpful? Or why is it seen as positive? And then another piece of that, or either question you want to answer, why do you think change is important for the adults in your life? Like us as school board members, or your teachers or principals?
Well, is this working? Yeah, okay. I think that, at least for me, being a student, sometimes the like day-to-day routine really gets to me. Like, wake up every day, same time, go to school for this amount of time, do my after-school routine and that sort of thing. So, change in like the literal sense, I do like it. Like, if there's something like special going on in the week, or like something different I'm looking forward to, that can definitely be helpful. And I agree with the idea that change is like a gradual process, not really an end result, because like as you progress as well, your goals are bound to change with that. Like as soon as you accomplish one goal, another goal will form, that sort of thing. And I think for adults, especially at school, it can be hard to understand what students are going through, or how students might get really exhausted from 7-hour, 6-hour school days, that sort of thing, and to be accommodating to that while also like maintaining the norm. Like, we do need to have set rules, set routine, that sort of thing for our like school to operate properly. And so I think just more awareness on how like bogged down we can get as students would definitely be helpful in that aspect.
I was thinking, I actually had notes from my reading about change, and something out of her work talked a lot about small-scale changes and how important it is to look at it in that way, which I think is a much safer way to be part of change. I have seen in my work in the past, when we kind of demand change, that doesn't go very well. But when we invite people to participate and to understand the reasoning behind it, kind of that fractal part, looking at relationships and looking at small and large and patterns, all of that, I think we have better success with change. And so I just appreciated that in this book and her thinking on that.
All right, so thanks for the response to that one. I have one more, and then I'm going to turn it over for the next couple. And this one is this one's about nonlinear and iterative transformation. Transformation doesn't happen in a linear way. It's kind of going to what Chris said. It happens in cycles, convergences, explosions. If we release the framework of failure, we can realize that we are in iterative cycles, and we can keep asking ourselves, how do we learn from this? And so thinking about how we learn from this, so I have both one to share out and one not to share out, but just take a moment to think about a personal example of where you've grown from a failure. And then the question to share with the group is, how has your experience with these iterative cycles influenced what you bring to the school board? So how do you, as we think about change and we think about it as nonlinear, how has that influenced some of the decisions you made, or how you've interacted in this space. I'm glad I'm done reading because my glasses are finally shot. All right, so.
You can just use the one.
That's right. So again, thinking about those personal experiences, and then with iterative cycles influencing what you bring to the school board.
Oh, go ahead, Sammy. You have not talked. No, go.
Board goals is a very good example. Well, you said personal experiences. Never mind.
No, that's related to your work on the board.
So, I think two things that comes to mind: board goals and non-discrimination based on gender identity policy. Both of them were very good, really personal experience being exposed to the process that's informed my what I can bring to the school board, and maybe I've been now more adaptable to the board goals. That hey, you can't have it all at the first iteration. Maybe we can improve upon it one step at a time. We need to be okay that the work is not complete. And I know you're encouraging us to move with the draft and build on it. And I think that was a really good realization when you told us about that. I was like, yes. Just like the last time we went through the school board goals, we had a first iteration. We had to build on it. And that learning or that draft that we put in there helped us actually inform the next iteration. Likewise for the gender identity, don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect, or the other way around. So our ability to really be okay with unfinished work, however we can build on it if we can lean on that unfinished work and get it into operation, has been something that I've learned a lot through this experience, whether adopting a policy that took multiple iterations with public comments and community members' comments and staff comments, and then another iteration 4 years or 5 years down the road, or the school board goals that we're going through them right now as well. I think these are two examples or experiences that have influenced me to think that you shouldn't wait until you have Michelangelo perfect sculpture to say we have a completed work. It's okay to have a first draft and work on that first draft and adopt it and move on from there for the next one.
Thanks.
I was just going to offer like the adaptability piece. Just like some of my experiences in life have required me to be extremely adaptable, and I think that that is just like something I can help bring, that I have helped bring to my role on the board, and also thinking creative outside the box, basically, as the saying goes. Even though I was like, where is this box? But so thinking about creative solutions too, and ways to rely on each other. I think those are just things that, because of life circumstances, have influenced what I bring to the board.
Just very quickly, I recall a time when, if we're talking about failures, imagine I had tried to walk on the ice and just biffed it. That was, personally, and I had a close mentor who I still really trust, and he sat down with me and he said, mistakes happen, but who you are is what happens after the mistake. And I hope that, I know that they're going to happen. I know failures are going to continue to happen. I hope that we as a board can come together and always be deciding who we are after the mistake, after the failure, after we tried something and it didn't work, or we're in a big struggle.
Oh, yeah, we're at our time, but we also are okay, I believe, because we only have a couple. I don't think that the other ones are going, we can probably do another 10 minutes, maybe? We can check in and, we'll check in 10 minutes on time, but yeah, because we have a couple more questions.
So another theme that we identified was the emphasis in the book on creating great possibilities. So there's a quote in the book. In order to create a world that works for more people, for more life, we have to collaborate on the process of dreaming, envisioning, and implementing that world. And so a couple kind of questions that stem from that. So thinking about that quote, what is our role as a board in this collaborative process that she's kind of describing here? This collaborative process where we are, where we're dreaming and envisioning and implementing. So thinking about that, what are your thoughts about how as a board do we do that? Maybe collectively, but also then individually as board members, what does that look like?
So probably I'll lean on both the concept of help me out. Fractals. And this one is if we think about ourselves as fractals, as entities with ideas and dreams and thoughts and experiences, and from OSBA's speaker, everybody brings in their backpack. That's like within us, there are fractals of experiences. But still, as a board, we're a body of 7 fractals, and maybe you can say 10 or 20 or 30 or 600 staff, or the whole community. And really, our role is to be mindful that when we read our packets or come in with a good day or not, we come in with a recent experience or something we read on the news, or a constituent we met. All of that creates that pattern in a different shape for us. And I believe part of the equity lens that we've been encouraged to use or we're committed to use is to be very mindful as we collaborate, is we bring in more people intentionally to have a better pattern to solve a problem. So if you want to create a great possibility for a world that works for students with disabilities or for our Black students, is to be very mindful of bringing their voice in and making sure their voice is incorporated in the packets that we read and the staffing and our own board membership and the experiences and the places we go to as individuals, so we become better board members. I think that's how I really think I can connect both two in a way where that would help us be, or help me be, a better board member.
So looking at sort of part B of that, where we've been successful in co-creating, I think last session, or last year, the work we did with our student reps in writing their contributions to the dress code policy and their contributions to our policy on student reps is really an example of how, by including those voices, I mean, sort of what I said about fractals earlier and what Sammy just shared, how including those voices are building the patterns that work for more people by listening to the people who policies will impact. We then make better policies. And I think that's how, by listening to the people who were going to use the buildings, we built better buildings. And so I think it's a pattern that we've been working on. We can always do better. But it's had very positive impacts. And I think has been very rewarding, because like the work with the students last year was great. And now we get to, mentor them and spend more time with them, which is also great.
So one thing I really like about this concept, because we talk a lot about transformational change and adaptive change, and I really like this. This, she has this whole bit around science fiction, and how, so because it hasn't been created, in some ways it is science fiction. And I just really, that idea really stuck with me, because we so often are trying to figure things out in new and unique ways, and to think about it almost like that. And the other thing about science fiction is that so often those things come to being. The things that we've seen in old science fiction is like, oh yeah, that's my cell phone. So it's like it happens in both directions, and so that really just like if that's probably the part of this book that stood out to me the most, just that concept. So I appreciate the question.
Interesting, because when I read that this book had a science fiction influence, I was like, you lost me at science. I don't want to read this book. But she gives an example. I don't know if it's in the book, but I don't remember if it's in the book, but it was in a video I was watching about her, about the ants that pile on top of each other to float through the water to get to higher ground, and how they work together to survive. And I thought that was a great representation of our school board and how we work together with the same goal. And so I got back into the book there with that example. But I thought that was a good way it also represented us, so.
This is a shameless plug. If you enjoyed that, when I saw this book, I thought that name looks familiar. She co-edited Octavia's Brood, which is a fantastic collection of science fiction stories, and I think a lot of the concepts really play out in some really, really great short works. So if you enjoy that, there's more.
And I kept thinking as I was reading this, I have been devouring the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin over break, and it's a lot about communities and building communities and who gets excluded and who gets included, and how that affects the structure of the community. And the last line, I won't tell you what characters say it, but if it's do you want to go build a better world? Yes. Okay, let's go. And so it's another one that, if you like science fiction, that would fit right in with a lot of this work that she's talking about.
And that's like one of the things about science fiction is that it helps us imagine possibilities. It's like you're creating this world and the safety net of like a creative space, because the stakes are lower if it's not in our everyday lived, but then it does spill into our everyday lived when you start thinking about what's possible outside of just what exists, like what you were saying, like the cell phone, for example, or there's so many examples, like even like digital billboards and stuff like that used to be sci-fi, and they're like all over the place now. And so just things that seem futuristic are way off, are not really possible, can be possible, and that's one of the things I like about her too. She like challenges us to think a little bit beyond, and that's, yeah. And for the co-creating, those examples, I was thinking about the examples of working with the students on the two policies, and also I was thinking about the work done on the biased reporting system, and like listening to student voice and concern, and working with staff and community, and also the work that's going on with the board goals themselves, which is probably a good segue into the next spot, because that's been going on for a year now, right? Because we did a little bit over a year, because the listening session started last December, not this past one, to start influencing how the board goals are going to look. And so now we're getting towards more solidified. So it's been like a slow, intentional process of co-creating too. And you've seen some of that. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to pause and give it back to.
No, it's great. I think that what I really appreciate about the kind of the framing of this book through this science fiction lens is that the question when you're thinking about what you need is not confined. It's not limited by what you think is actually possible. In the world of science fiction writing, you just make it. And then it is, and it doesn't matter. Like this little button in the real world, it can't do any of those things. But in your story, if you need it to, you make it and it does. And then you grow into that. We've had several I think I would say might have started out feeling aspirational, but we're like, but we need this goal. Like, we need this to be the thing that we're going to. It doesn't matter if today, right now, we don't know how we would do that. That's still the thing we need. So let's say that, and then let's figure out how we build to get to that. And in this world, I think what she's kind of really, I think, kind of brilliantly framing is that you will never get to the world that you want if you aren't willing to accept that that world is not right now, and you won't get it with what you have to work with, because if you could get it with what you had to work with, you'd already have it. And so it is going to require something different. It is going to require something new, and it's the process of declaring that that's what it needs to look like, and we don't have it yet, that's the catalyst to actually get it to happen. And so, yeah, and also a note, I totally agree with reading. We should read that one next. No, I don't know. Chris might not like that, but but it is brilliant, and I see it, and it's all through here. So anyway, we have one more question or one more theme though that came up. So I'm going to turn it over to Lou. No, Shauna. I'm going to turn it over to Shauna.
And our timer is like 30 seconds. We trying to make us go, Sammy, trying to make us come over, trying to break my streak. I'm just joking. I think we should go ahead and answer the last question.
That was smooth on his part.
That was.
And so a theme that has already come up, has already been named, is woven throughout the book, is, as well as has separate sections, is interdependence. That we are inherently interconnected, and true transformation occurs when individuals and communities recognize and embrace their interdependence. I pulled out a couple of quotations from the section on interdependence, one sentence and then a follow-up couple of sentences that really stood out to me was this one, that humans are unique because we compete when it isn't necessary. And that sentence was in the context of other examples in nature, of the necessity and need at times to compete. And this really stood out to me in terms of that acknowledgement that we are the only species that competes even in moments when it's not necessary. And then the quotation goes on to read, the idea of interdependence is that we can meet each other's needs in a variety of ways, that we can truly lean on others and they can lean on us. It means we have to decentralize our idea of where solutions and decisions happen, where ideas come from. And so the questions that I've put on here to share with all of you is, and can be brought out broadly beyond board goals, but I decided to center it there. How have you seen interdependence reflected in the process of co-creating district goals? How can we, all of us here, school board student reps, district leadership, and others, continue to weave interdependence into not only finalizing the district goals, but also supporting and living those goals?
Really, going back to 2018, where the goals were truly the school board goals and staff leadership, and that was it. I believe it was top down. It served its purpose, but really seeing how we went through the process right now, those school board goals still are. We have to take accountability and responsibility that as a governing body, we're setting those goals and adopting them, but truly they're coming from all the stakeholders who participated into it. And I think it's just more effective, more reflective of the needs of the institution and the community, and probably the idea of interdependence clearly shows in how we did it in the second iteration way more effectively, and by we, the collective we, thanks for the initiative of this district. So I think that's probably answering A. How can we continue to weave it to finalize it? I'll let someone else answer that question.
I agree with everything you said, Sammy, about how it shows up in the way that we've done this process and just like the intentional listening, because it becomes like the collective goals, not just like what we think. It's like what's important to students, what's important to the community, what's important to staff, which are also part of the community, what's important to leaders and leadership. And I think that that changes a lot because it does create that interdependence, because we're relying on the voices of a lot of people, not just our own thoughts. And it helps keep us in check of our thoughts going in the right direction of the community needs too. And so I think that that's important, that we point out too, that that co-creation has a lot of potential, and to finalize the goals, that's it, and support them. Thanks for the think ahead, Shauna, with that one. I think it's just that final check-in that we're doing with community before we read them as a board again is a good example of that. We're like, this is what Brian and staff and the board has thought. What do you all think? And then supporting it. I really think like continuing some kind of community listening, I think would be good. Just check-ins to say like, how are we doing as a board with these goals outside of the board meetings? And so I think like those community listening sessions, we can't do all the time because they take a lot of planning resources, and also we always end up leaving somebody out because not everybody can make it to them no matter what time of the day it is. But I think some kind of way to check in with the community outside of board meetings, I think will be good. But yeah. And we did have one more question. Or did you want to say anything on that? You don't have, do you want to do the last one? Sure. You can, if you want.
All right, so our final question then is, what was your biggest takeaway from the book as it applies to our work or your role?
That's one I feel we can all answer like really briefly, maybe, if that's possible for some people. Is that possible? Yeah? Huh? Yeah. Oh, there's a big fan going behind. So I'll do my Teacher Lou voice. Can we all do a quick, yeah, thank you, the whip around, but what side do we want to start on? The fan just went off, yeah, but that's okay.
I'll start. You might have to start with the Socratic method of teaching if we keep up like this. I'm going to go back to interdependence, and I think there's a great example right there. Kim, fix that for us. And that's what I really took out from this book.
Wait, what was it?
Interdependence.
I think the concept of the nonlinear and iterative transformation sort of resonated with me. I often say to my kids, it's not failing, it's practicing. And I feel like that, her sort of section on that kind of brought that idea into focus.
There was a quote in the book that said, "Our actions and beliefs of today will shape the future, tomorrow, and next generation." And I really appreciated that, and the fact that me personally, I don't feel alone doing that here. So.
It's hard for me to pick just one, but I'll be very brief in those things that I choose. There was a quote that Adrienne Marie Brown was quoting Octavia Butler in saying, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you." And that really stood out to me, along with many other ideas. One around creating great possibilities, that radical imagination and imagining of what the possibilities are and what the world can be, and looking at how to realize that. And then also that idea of interdependence. And I really appreciated all of the wonderful analogies with nature and in thinking about oak trees, for instance, in the way that they are rooted and deeply rooted and intertwined with one another in terms of really grounding and holding one another in place.
We talked about some of my biggest takeaways already, so I'll give another example that we didn't talk about that I think is a good reminder for everybody. She has a spot in there where she talks about like resisting being the superstar kind of leadership model, where you're centered, you're end up centering yourself instead of the community or the people you represent. And I think that was I really liked. I think that was in the interdependence chapter too. Because at that point you're like relying on yourself and building your own self up and stuff like that. And I thought that was a nice takeaway too for people who are in elected positions, especially working on a school board, to not become bigger than the message or the communities that we represent.
Well, oh, sorry.
Well, I'd already shared mine, which was that the concept of the science fiction. So go ahead.
Sorry. And right on the heels of the whole don't make yourself bigger than, I'm like, I'm going to just go over the superintendent. Um, um, no, right? um, so there were a lot of really wonderful themes in here, but I think that that reciprocity of impact, that the quote that Shauna read, really resonated with me, and that linked, I thought, nicely to the iterative cycle idea that, like, when it's iterative, it's not repetitive, it's not doing the same thing, it's you do something and then you interact with what has happened as a result, and then you do something again, and it's never ending, but it's always changing and it's always responding to. And I love that idea that, you know, we have this ability to make an impact, be impacted, absorb, interact with, observe, then impact again, back and forth. That, and there's something that's really exciting about that process and that work. And I see that a lot in the work of being on the board. And so, yeah, I think, but I would highly recommend it. There are lots of great themes that came out of it. And even though we've gone over the amount of time we scheduled, we haven't begun to scratch the surface of the value of the read that this was.
How much time do I have? So, really, thank you, Lou, for highlighting something I feel it's really crucial, and I've learned a lot from you and your leadership model, uplifting community, and it's not about one person, and it's not about taking credit as a person or even as an institution or a board. It's the community, and as the larger credit and the larger contribution, the better change, and the more, frankly, the more sustainable change is. And if we go back in history, there are examples where outcomes could have been better if we can embrace that model. And I'm really inspired by that. I want to give you personally the credit. And I know it goes counter to the point that you mentioned, but it is truly inspiring to see that emerging through our community, through our board and district, and represented by the school district leadership and everybody here. I think that's a huge takeaway that I hope we continue. And I'm reminded also, sorry, two takeaways, like last week when we concluded the bond, and where I said, like, everybody transformed through that process. It's like 10 years or so process, and some of us joined in the middle of it, beginning of it, or tail end of it, and all of us have grown with growth and the change that's happened, and how that has enabled the product itself to be better, but also us to be better contributors to the next thing. And that's really the exciting thing, which is what's the next thing. And we can really dream bigger than what we can imagine, because we're going to continue to grow beyond our imagination. So these are my two takeaways.
I wish you would have ended with Sammy, because that's much more eloquent than what I'm going to say. But the interdependence is one thing that really speaks to me. I think about it when I was a teacher and what impact I had in that classroom and how small it was, but it still kind of turned a cog. And that's one thing that I've learned a lot in this position is the small turns that I make, how everything, a lot of other things move as a result. So that interdependence really, really spoke to me.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thank you all for taking the time to read together and learn together. I think it's, especially as folk who are serving on a board of education, reflecting lifelong learning is a good thing to do. And I will say one more thing about this book is that the first time I read it, I was sort of like, this is like stuff that a bunch of us do in the work, because I read it in the context of work that we do, and this person wrote a book, so now it's validated, and I was like, what does that say about people that already do the work? And so sometimes it's helpful to have something that's in something like a book where it does reach more people, though, and you can see yourself affirmed or reflected. So like what you're saying, Melissa, is like you are already doing that, and you're like, see yourself reflected in there, I think is also something to think about where you've seen yourself in the book too. But yeah, so thank you for taking the time. I know we went a little bit over. I think we're still on good time though. Oh yes, if you need to go, it's 8:16. So we have a couple more items, but you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to head on out. Thanks for that reminder, Shauna. The next item on the agenda is the emergency procurement of replacement baseball field turf at Crescent Valley High School, earthwork and drainage. Did you have something about it or no? Okay. Is there any discussion? Or is there any discussion first? Does anyone wish to make a motion? Everybody's computers fell asleep. Hold on, because we have wording down.
I can do it.
Okay, Chris.
I'm on the wrong one, sorry. I move to authorize staff to enter into contract with Pacific Excavation for earthwork and drainage improvements at CVH, Crescent Valley High School, the varsity baseball field, in an amount not to exceed $350,000 donated through the Corvallis Public School Foundation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Chris and seconded by Judah. Is there any further discussion?
Thank you, Foundation. Thank you to the Foundation.
Yeah, thanks to the foundation and the community that donated too. That's much needed. Okay, it has been moved by Chris and seconded by Judah to authorize staff to enter into contract with Pacific Excavation for earthwork and drainage improvements at the Crescent Valley High School varsity baseball field in an amount not to exceed $350,000 donated through the Corvallis Public Schools Foundation. I'm gonna call for the vote. So Judah?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Shauna?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And they vote aye. Passes unanimously. That is good news. And then next on the agenda is Resolution 24-0101, Declaration of Emergency at Sheldon Middle School. Is there any discussion on this item?
I was just wondering if we could get a little information about the extent of this damage, and is it going to impact students in classes?
Okay, Kim's going to come up.
Kim, why don't you come up to talk about the facilities?
I think that's good for our community to know. Thanks for asking that, Sarah.
So at 1:30 on Sunday morning, I got the phone call from the fire department that we had 2 inches of standing water in the upper gym at Sheldon. And what had occurred is a power bump left our boilers offline, and it did not send a notification through, which should have happened. And so the coil froze and was spewing water everywhere. And so we immediately started mitigation of that. Belfour disaster services came through and started pumping water out. But the end result is the upstairs gym floor is got 3-foot tall buckles in it. And the floor is totaled, it's out. We're gonna get a new gym floor. And so we also had water intrusion down into the locker rooms beneath that gym. And so there is some damage to the drywall that has to be mitigated. Students will not have access to the locker room tomorrow and for a few more days while we do that mitigation. But as far as additional student impact, there are a couple cables in the downstairs gym that are going to remain along the wall, but all of the other equipment is out of their spaces, and we have planned for the middle school basketball program to use Bessie Coleman's gym, and we'll provide transportation services over there for game days. They have chosen to continue with practices at the main gym, just all together downstairs. But we'll be monitoring that, and if they need support for other gym space, we'll make that happen. Mm-hmm.
So just real questions. We are going to, or just clarifying, we're going to document the method of contracting, and it will be reported back to the board at a later date. Is that correct?
Yes. Let's get Lauren up here because she's doing the contracting piece with me.
So if we use the emergency procurement method, we actually have to report back to the state on those, and actually they review it for compliance. So what we're asking is for the authority to declare that an emergency, therefore we can mitigate things a lot quicker and get that building back where it needs to be. It just helps us through that process. Anything over $25,000, there's a pretty extensive process for public procurement law, and it's really difficult to have any contract for this scope of work under $25,000. So it's just giving us the authority to move forward with this instead of waiting for next month's board meeting to ask for those specific. We can report that back to you. There's a format for that, but it actually is required to go to the state.
Go state, perfect. And last thing I want to ask is there a need for an expiration or conclusion for the emergency, or is it open-ended as long as the scope is clear or documented?
Yeah, we don't need to have an end date on it. It's just until it's no longer an emergency, then that would run out. But that would just be until that specific incident is repaired.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Any other discussion?
Ready to make a motion?
Okay, does anybody wish to make a motion?
I move that resolution number 24-0101 be adopted to declare an emergency at Sheldon Middle School.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I think Therese.
Therese got it.
Therese. Okay, it has been moved by Sammy and seconded by Therese. Any further discussion? Okay, has been moved by Sammy, and seconded by Therese that resolution number 24-0101 be adopted to declare an emergency at Sheldon Middle School. Judah?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Shauna?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That passes unanimously, so that is passed. I did want,
No, I just wanted them to stay up here for a second.
oh,
Go ahead.
keep going. I was just gonna say, thanks for your work on that, and thinking about the Sheldon community and those larger impacts too, for the students and staff. Yeah. What did
So I just want to, because it's an opportunity to thank the maintenance crew and the facilities team for all the work they've been doing. So we've had a couple of other leaks as well, and the teams have been able to address those without bringing in outside contractors. So that has been an additional strain on that department, as well as all of the snow removal and ice removal. So it's just, again, an opportunity to thank that team. While some of us have been working from home or off the last few days, that team has been working extensive hours in the cold, and I just want to, again, share and express appreciation.
Yeah, definitely. If you can pass that thanks along, that'd be appreciated. That's a lot of work.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, the last thing on the agenda is board member comments. Does anybody have any comments? Go ahead, Sarah. Sarah with the mic. this
With my
evening.
mic button issues. I just wanted to comment that I have already gotten several questions about how we're going to make up these days. So that's already being discussed among both staff and families. So I would just encourage us to come to a conclusion. And I reminded people that the last time we spoke with the teachers, and I think we talked to the unions about how they would prefer those makeup days to happen, so that that's how we did it. I just sort of said, that's how we did it last time, so I would expect something similar, but I didn't know. So I would just encourage us to make that decision earlier rather than later.
So ideally, my plan is Jennifer Duvall has been out the last couple days, so meeting with her and a couple of folks, Nikki McFarland, who helps a lot with calendaring, to come up with a solution. One of the things that happens when you do your adoption is you identify some potential makeup days, so it doesn't require us to come back to the board for approval typically. So we'll be able to work those things out on the operational side and get that messaging out ASAP.
Chris?
I just, along those lines, wanted to thank Ryan and everyone else that had to make those difficult decisions, I'm sure at 4 o'clock in the morning about school or late in the evening, and just really thinking about student safety and thinking about kids who are driving, kids that live up in the hills, and for a lot of people having to walk to school, and just thinking about safety. So I appreciate that. I know it's not easy decisions, and I know you get a lot of mixed feelings about it all, but I appreciate.
Thanks.
Any other comments?
So, it was a challenging several days for our entire community, and for a handful of our community members, there was even an elevated risk. So I wanted to share that if you, are a household that receives SNAP benefits, you are eligible to apply for additional funds for any food or costs that might have been lost as a result of power outages. And so to apply for replacement benefits, the thing is you only have 10 days. So if we, if that'd be information that we could share with the folks that are in communication with our families, particularly our navigators, maybe send something out over communication as well, that'd be great, because that deadline is really strict. And that 10 days is technically from the day that you experienced power outages, although I think that when we were experiencing power outages, the state might have been as well. So anyway, imminently is the point. But that's really valuable, and so every little bit can help households to get through. So if you had any loss at all, please reach out and see about getting additional resources. And to that end, I want to also just extend a thank you to the community programs that worked really hard to try and reach families that were, and particularly folks that are housing vulnerable during this weather. It also really highlights that this is still an unmet need in our community. So this is a really good time for us to be mindful that many of us were able to hunker down and wait it out, but some folks that wasn't really possible. We have some work to do as a community to help those families.
I was just going to add to the gratitude chain that was going around, both in terms of gratitude for maintenance folks and crew, individuals and teams who are out and out. We've seen out tonight as well, really working very hard to make sure schools and sidewalks and roads and parking lots are safe tomorrow for students to come back, as well as to district leadership for the very challenging decisions that you've had to make, and in prioritizing safety first and the well-being of the community. And also to everybody else, to all other staff who have had to juggle the chaos of the unexpected that comes with that, who are also preparing and getting ready to receive students back in schools tomorrow after a full additional unexpected almost full week off, and so just a lot of gratitude for them being probably juggling work responsibilities, being home, some of whom have their own children at home, and all that comes with that. So just so much gratitude to that, and also to students and families for understanding, for taking care of each other, and the way that the community seems to have, in many ways, just really compassionately stepped forward to take care of one another and one another's safety as well as possible.
Okay. I did have one, before we close out, I did have a question about how the board feels about reviewing our bullying policy again. I think it's been quite some time. It's been prompted by just interaction with community. I will not, for privacy, go into any details, obviously, about some areas maybe that may need to be strengthened perhaps, or I'm not sure, we haven't looked at it for a while. I don't think since I've been on the board, we haven't reviewed it. Have we? Yeah, it was like the updates, but like not like in a deep read of it. And so I was wondering if how you all felt about that. Okay, so if we can pull that one to do some work on, that'd be great. And some of it is thinking about, what I will share, I think it's okay to share about the presentation, right? It was during a presentation about suicide prevention. And when I was watching it, as a lot of people know, my personal experience with family with that is the systematic pieces are usually left out of prevention, and like as its own little piece of like systems change, like systems intervention. It's very focused on things that are obviously needed, like noticing signs and supporting students and colleagues and parents, family members, and out of the prevention like dimensions. It's embedded in there in some ways, but it's not specifically called out. And so that's kind of where some of that thought process, and then also the interaction with community. So following that, but if that is okay, we'll go ahead and pull that one. And then I also wanted to express gratitude. Thank you, Ryan, for getting up super early when you do that for the students and staff and community. I don't think people know that you do that. And I don't know if is that the norm, or is that just a... I don't know if that's the norm, but that's pretty cool that you do that. Thank you. And then walking over, or not walking, but coming in the driveway and seeing the snow plow out in the dark, I thought it says a lot too about like the investment and trying to get the ice. The ice is so thick. We don't live in Arctic conditions usually, so I didn't realize how long it takes for ice to melt, especially ice that thick. And so I was quite surprised myself. It's probably a lot of community members, and depending on the shade level and elevations in different parts of town, it's just, I don't even know what campus looks like. I haven't been there since last week, so we'll see if we go back tomorrow. But with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 8:33 p.m. Went over 3 minutes, Sammy. So the meeting is adjourned at 8:33 p.m. Not bad, though.